My name's Daniel. I'm 29, and if you've ever found yourself sitting at a folding stool near a public bathroom, at a family event you helped pay for, wondering how you ended up being treated like an afterthought by people who used to braid your hair or teach you how to throw a football, then yeah, you'll probably understand this one. It all started with my cousin Melissa's wedding. Melissa and I were tied as kids. She used to call me D, and we had this little game where we'd swap lyrics to pop songs until someone messed up. But that was back when life was simpler. Before college. Before money. Before her mum and Sylvia started treating my side of the family like the charity branch of the family tree. My parents never had much, but they gave what they could. My dad fixed cars. My mum worked nights at the hospital. I got through school on a scholarship, paid my own way, and eventually started a small IT consulting business that, after years of grinding, finally took off. But success changes how people look at you, especially family. Suddenly, you're not the quiet one or the nerd. You're the one who's doing well, which quickly turns into the one who can help out, and faster than you can blink. You're the invisible wallet everyone thinks they're entitled to. Melissa got engaged to this guy named Brett, tall, smug, with that kind of beard that looks like he watched too many business podcasts. Whatever. I didn't judge. I got the invite months ahead, a fancy card wrapped in twine and wax seal. I figured she wanted me there. I was wrong. 2 weeks before the wedding, I get a call from Aunt Sylvia. I could already hear the fake warmth in her voice. "Oh, Daniel, we're just so excited to see you at the wedding." Melissa was wondering, would you be willing to help with a few expenses? Nothing big, just the cake and the photographer deposit. I should have said no. I should have remembered the way Melissa hadn't really called me in the last year, or how Aunt Sylvia only ever reached out when something was needed. But I was tired. It was late. And something about hearing my aunt use that gentle, syrupy voice made me say, "Sure, just let me know the numbers." She sent over a spreadsheet, a literal spreadsheet, and I stared at it in disbelief. The little help was $4,100, $700 for the cake and desserts, $300 for the catering deposit, and the rest for miscellaneous venue fees. I paused. I hovered over the reply button, but then I thought, this is Melissa's wedding. Maybe I'll finally be seen again. Maybe it'll mean something. So I paid. No thank you note, no call. Just a short received email from the planner. Wedding day came, fast. The venue is beautiful, rustic barn, floral arches, fairy lights strung across wooden beams. I arrived 15 minutes early, wearing the suit I reserved just for family events, the one I keep trying to outgrow with gym visits that never quite stick. No one greeted me, no hugs, no "Hey D, you made it." Instead, I saw Melissa across the courtyard in her gown, radiant, laughing with a cluster of friends and family. I raised a hand, but she didn't notice, or pretended not to. I found my name card on the seating board. It was tucked on the bottom, right corner, Daniel Evans, table 8. Now, if you've been to weddings, you know the closer your table is to the cake, the closer you are to the family circle. I looked around. Table 1 was up front, right near the couple. Table 8. It was barely indoors. I made my way over and froze. Table 8 wasn't a table. It was a bar stool near the staff exit, right next to the bathroom line. My heart sank. I stood there for a second, trying to convince myself it was a mistake, that maybe someone moved things around. But then I heard her voice. "Oh, good, you found your seat," Melissa said, appearing beside me. "We just had so many guests show up. We had to make some adjustments." I looked at her. "A bar stool by the bathroom." She gave a sheepish shrug and said, "Well, Brett's cousin flew in from Miami, and my college roommate came last minute. You understand, right?" I didn't respond. I just nodded quietly. She smiled like I'd just done her a favor, then walked off. Sat. The metal stool rocked a little every time someone flushed. I stared at my glass of water, wondering how I could have been this naive. 10 minutes later, a server passed by with drinks. I asked if I could get a wine. She blinked. Sorry, you're not on the drink list. You'll need to go to the cash bar. I stared at her. I'm not on the list. She nodded. This area wasn't part of the catered zone. Cash bar. No wine. A stool. No family. Just me. An hour later, it got worse. Dinner was being served in courses. Plates were brought out. Beef medallions, grilled vegetables, artisan rolls. I was skipped. Twice. When I flagged a waiter, he hesitated, then said, "Oh, sorry. I was told you were self-catered." I laughed, thinking it was a joke. But his face didn't change. Self-catered. I grabbed a napkin and walked to the buffet table, hoping maybe they had a backup set up. A few finger sandwiches were left for the staff. I grabbed two and returned to my stool. It was then I heard the laughter. My cousin Brandon, Melissa's brother, walked past, smirking. He leaned toward the table behind me and said, "Guess Daniel finally found his place in the family." They laughed, and I just sat there, chewing through, stale bread, wondering why I ever thought I belonged. But then came the moment, the one that changed everything. As the cake was wheeled in, a 3-tiered monstrosity with gold trim and fresh roses, the planner walked up to me, clipboard in hand, her face a little flushed. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you Daniel Evans?" I nodded, slowly. She tapped her pen against the clipboard. "Hi, sorry to bother you during the reception, but we're just confirming the remaining payment for the cake, catering, and venue services. The previous deposit was received, but the remaining balances." I raised a hand and sipped my drink. I could feel the weight of a dozen eyes turning toward us. "I'd suggest," I said calmly, "you ask the actual family." And I set my drink down. Her face went pale. Behind her, Melissa turned from the cake and saw the planner talking to me. Her eyes narrowed, her lips starting to part in confusion. I could feel it, like the moment before a storm, when everything goes still and cold. Melissa blinked twice, then handed her bouquet to a bridesmaid and began striding over. I could tell the planner was getting nervous, glancing between me and the bride, unsure of what exactly she'd just walked into. "Daniel." Melissa called, her voice rising, just loud enough to draw the attention of the nearby tables. "What's going on? Is there a problem?" I turned to face her slowly, careful to keep my expression neutral. There was a time I might have folded in moments like this, smoothed it over, shrunk myself, but not tonight. The planner wanted to know who'd be covering the remaining $4,100, I said, casually. Since I'm just the guy sitting near the restroom, I figured she should check with the actual family. Her face flushed immediately. "Daniel, you agreed to cover the costs. You said you'd help." "I did help," I replied, sipping the last of my wine. "You got your deposit, you got your cake, you got your catering, you even got a stool for me near the toilets." That was cute. Aunt Sylvia was making her way over now, dragging Uncle Robert along, her heels clicking like a metronome of incoming passive aggression. "Daniel," she said in a tone that dripped with condescension, masked as concern. "This is really not the time for drama. Melissa's wedding is a once-in-a-lifetime event. Why are you making it about yourself?" I tilted my head, pretending to consider her question. "I'm not. In fact, I've barely spoken to anyone all night. Didn't want to take attention away from the happy couple. But when your wedding planner corners me with a clipboard asking for thousands of dollars while I'm chewing on a crusty sandwich, I figure it's fair to speak up." Melissa's fiancé, Brett, in all his smug, undershaved glory, joined the circle. "Look, man," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder like we were best bros. "I get that you're feeling a little left out, but this is really not cool." I stood up, slowly, deliberately. His hand fell off my shoulder like it had touched something hot. "Left out?" I said. "No, Brett. Left out is when someone forgets to invite you to their bachelor party. This is being deliberately humiliated," Melissa scoffed. "Humiliated? You were seated, weren't you? Next to the bathroom, I said, stepping closer. Not even part of the catered guest list. No wine, no meal. You even told the staff I was self-catered. At that, Melissa looked genuinely confused. We had to make room. You should have told me you were bringing a +1. I didn't bring a +1, I said. I brought $4,100. The planner stepped back awkwardly, clearly regretting ever approaching me. The guests had started to notice something was going down. Conversations quieted. Heads turned. Aunt Sylvia hissed. "Daniel, you're embarrassing yourself." I let out a dry laugh. Embarrassing myself? Oh, I think that ship sailed somewhere between the dry sandwich and the bar stool. Brett looked like he was about to say something, but I raised a hand to cut him off. "Let me make something very clear," I said, now loud enough for nearby tables to hear. I was asked to help, and I did. I never asked to be treated like royalty, but I also didn't expect to be treated like a stray dog. You want my money? You don't get to spit on me while cashing the check. Melissa's jaw clenched. So what? You're just walking away. No, I said, turning back to the planner. I'm staying for the show, but I won't be paying another cent. If there's an issue with the venue or the cake, I suggest you talk to the bride. She's the one who sat her financial backer by the toilets. The planner nodded awkwardly and walked off. Melissa tried to call after her, but she was already lost in the crowd. That's when the murmurs started. Guests were whispering. Some cousins looked uncomfortable. One of Melissa's bridesmaids gave me a sympathetic shrug, mouthing, "That's messed up." Even Uncle Robert looked unsure now, rubbing the back of his neck like he wanted to disappear. Melissa crossed her arms. "You know, Daniel, this day isn't about you." "You're right," I said, turning to go. "It's about family, real family. Shame you forgot what that actually means." I walked away before she could respond. Back to my sad little stool. But something felt different now. I wasn't shrinking. I wasn't eating in shame. I was just waiting, watching. The storm had cracked, but the thunder was still coming. Not 10 minutes later, the planner returned. This time, she didn't look unsure. She looked panicked. "Mr. Evans," she said, her voice tight. "I'm so sorry to bother you again, but the card we had on file was declined. The venue is asking for full payment by tonight, or they'll require an early shutdown. I've asked the bride and groom, but..." I raised an eyebrow. "They can't pay." She looked at me like she wished she'd asked literally anyone else for a job today. "They say you're the primary on the agreement." I nodded slowly, letting the silence settle like ash. Melissa was now arguing with Brett in the background. Aunt Sylvia was on the phone with someone, face pale. Guests were clearly beginning to catch on that something had gone very, very wrong. "I'd love to help," I said, finally, rising to my feet. "But I'm just the guy sitting near the restroom. Remember?" The planner gave me a strange smile, the kind people give when they're about to cry in a walk-in freezer. She muttered something about checking with the venue manager and backed away like I had contagious responsibility. I watched her disappear into the hallway as the soft, expensive music kept playing like everything was fine. It wasn't. Across the room, Melissa's perfect little reception started to fracture at the seams. I saw her snatch her phone off the gift table and start furiously typing. Brett, looking less like a groom and more like a panicked intern, was pacing by the bar. Guests were pretending not to notice, which made it more obvious. Whispering. Side glances. One of the older guests, Aunt Nancy, I think, actually leaned over to my dad and asked, "Is everything okay?" Melissa looks like she just found out the honeymoon got cancelled. Dad just shrugged. He didn't know the details. None of my immediate family did. I'd kept them out of the loop on purpose. I didn't want them to stop me. My phone buzzed. "Melissa, you are seriously out of line. Fix this. Now." I looked at the message, shook my head, and locked the screen without replying, because she still didn't get it. None of them did. They thought I was a resource, a walking debit card in a dress shirt. For years I tolerated it. I played the peacemaker. I helped with emergencies, sent just a little something when the holidays came around. stayed quiet when my name got conveniently skipped over during public thank yous. But not tonight. Tonight, I'd finally drawn a line, and the fallout had only just begun. From the corner of my eye, I saw Aunt Sylvia now whispering to Uncle Robert, with that frantic tone rich people use when they realize something they thought was handled by the help is now a full-on liability. Then the DJ's mic crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, clearly improvising, "if we could ask everyone to return to their seats for the couple's first dance." That was not the plan. I remembered the itinerary on the fancy trifold card at each place setting. The first dance was supposed to come after dinner. They were stalling. Sure enough, a few of the catering staff had stopped serving, somewhere in a huddle near the kitchen doors. One guy, a busser barely out of high school, walked right out the front with his apron still on. I stood up and walked toward the back of the room where the planner had gone. I passed table 3, where one of my second cousins leaned toward me and muttered, "What's happening?" Like this was a soap opera and I was the main character. At the hallway entrance, I stopped just short of the open door to a small office labeled Venue Manager. Inside, the planner was sitting on the edge of a desk, hands fidgeting. A man in a suit, probably the manager, was flipping through the contract folder, sighing. "No, it's not covered," he said, clearly annoyed. "The card on file was only for the deposit. That one still was scheduled for tonight. If that payment doesn't go through, we'll have to halt services. That includes catering, DJ, everything." I waited until he finished speaking before I knocked lightly and stepped inside. "Sorry to interrupt," I said, "but I thought I should make something clear." The planner straightened up. "Mr. Evans, Daniel." The manager gave me a cautious glance. "I'm not paying the rest," I said. "I was asked for a deposit as a gift. That's it. The agreement should have their names on it too, right?" The manager tapped the folder. "It does. Bride, groom, and you. Then you'll have to take it up with them," I said. "I'm done being their wallet." The manager leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "Understood. In that case, we'll need to suspend services if no payment is made within the next 30 minutes. The planner looked like she might cry. "This is going to be messy." I gave her a sympathetic smile. "Yeah, that's how truth usually feels the first time it's said out loud." Then I walked out. Back in the reception area, Melissa was standing near the cake table, phone still in hand, fury radiating from every inch of her. She caught sight of me immediately and stormed over. "Daniel, we need to talk." "Let's," I said calmly, stepping a few feet away from the guests, but not so far we couldn't be overheard. That was important now. I wanted witnesses. "You agreed," she hissed, "to help with the wedding. You can't just back out in the middle of it." I raised an eyebrow. "Help? Not fund. There's a difference. But you paid the deposit." I did. And then I got demoted to barstool duty. No dinner, no drinks, no seat at the table, literally, and not one word of thanks. She groaned, as if I were the problem. "Look, I'm sorry about the seat. I didn't plan the layout okay. You had time to assign everyone else a table." I checked the chart. "You had people from Brett's CrossFit gym at table 4. His CrossFit gym, Melissa." She flinched, but didn't deny it. "I gave you 4,100, I continued. "More than your college bestie, more than Aunt Nancy, more than Uncle Robert and his collection of bad jokes combined. And in return, I got treated like a stain on your guest list." She said nothing. "You know what the worst part is?" I asked. I wasn't even mad at first, just disappointed. But now, I'm actually glad this is happening. Because maybe this is the first time in your life you're going to learn that money doesn't come from nowhere. That people don't just owe you because you smile and act sweet when it benefits you. Her lips parted to fire back, but then Brett ran up to us. "Melissa," he said, out of breath, "they're cutting off the food service." Her eyes widened. "What? They just told the caterers to pack up unless payment is made." She turned. "Back to me, you did this." "No," I said, "you did this. I just stopped cleaning up your mess for once." I left them standing there, stunned. The music still played, but now it felt weird, like a soundtrack trying to cover a disaster. Guests were starting to realize something was happening. Waiters were quietly rolling food trays away. A few people had already grabbed their jackets and started heading for the doors. Back at my stool, I finally sat down again, crossed one leg over the other, and took a slow sip of my water. It tasted cleaner now, because the reckoning had just begun. Melissa just stood there, frozen, her eyes locked on the empty space where the caterers had been. The ambient music tried its best to paper over the awkward silence growing in the room, but it was like dressing a gunshot wound with a paper towel, utterly useless. Guests were no longer whispering. They were openly talking now. A few started checking their phones, likely debating how long they should stick around before leaving, under the excuse of an early morning. I watched from my stool, still planted beside the bathroom, still untouched, still symbolic of how I'd been treated all night. But something about the position felt different now, like it wasn't shameful anymore. It was deliberate, intentional. This wasn't the seat of the forgotten. It was the throne of someone who'd finally stopped allowing himself to be used. Melissa and Brett had disappeared through a side door with the planner and the venue manager, probably scrambling for solutions. Aunt Sylvia lingered behind, trying to assure concerned guests that everything's fine, even as one of the bartenders began putting away bottles. But nothing was fine. That's what made it so satisfying. 15 minutes passed. The first dance never happened. No toasts, no cake cutting, no bouquet toss, just a sinking ship and a bride clinging to a ceremony that had started slipping through her fingers the moment she forgot who helped her build it in the first place. My phone buzzed again. Another text. "Melissa, please come talk to me. We can fix this. Don't do this to me. Not us. Not the wedding. Me." I didn't reply. Instead, I stood up and walked over to my dad, who was sitting quietly at a nearby table, looking like he was trying to pretend. None of this affected him. "You all right?" I asked gently. He looked up. "Should I be asking you that?" I smiled. "Actually, I feel better than I have in years." He nodded slowly, studying me. Then, almost to himself, he said, "About time." That caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" I asked. He gave a small shrug. "You've always been generous, Danny. Too generous. Even when people treated you like furniture, you just kept showing up. I don't think you ever realized they stopped respecting you a long time ago." That hit hard. He patted my shoulder. "But tonight, you made sure they noticed." Just then, the side door creaked open again. Melissa emerged first. Her hair was slightly frizzed. Makeup not quite smudged, but no longer picture perfect. Brett followed behind, red in the face, jaw tight. The planner looked like she wanted to teleport out of existence. Melissa walked toward me directly. She stopped a few feet away, trying to force a smile, though it came out more like a pained grimace. "Daniel," she said, "can we talk? Just for a minute." I stayed still. "Whatever you need to say, you can say it here." She looked around. Guests were watching. Of course they were, but she was beyond pretending now. I didn't think this would happen," she said, eyes welling up. "I didn't think you'd do something like this." That hit me harder than I expected, but not in the way she probably hoped. "No, Melissa," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You didn't think. You assumed. You assumed I'd keep paying while being treated like an inconvenience. You assumed I wouldn't speak up, that I'd just smile through it like always." She opened her mouth, then closed it. There was nothing to say. "We just spoke to the venue manager," Brett chimed in. "They're giving us until midnight to wire the rest of the funds, or everything shuts down." I nodded and... He blinked. "Well, we're asking if you can." "No," I said, cutting him off. "You're not asking. You're expecting." Melissa's eyes were pleading now. "Danny, please. This is my wedding, and this was supposed to be a celebration of family," I replied. "But the moment you decided I wasn't family enough to sit at a table, or to get a meal, or even a glass of wine, you made your choice. I didn't mean to hurt you. That's the thing, I said quietly. You didn't even think it could hurt me. There was silence between us. I won't make the payment, I said finally. You'll need to figure something else out. Melissa's face crumpled then, tears forming, jaw quivering. It wasn't a performance anymore. This was panic, real panic, and it didn't feel good to watch. I didn't hate her. I didn't want to. But I also wasn't going to rescue her from the consequences of her actions. She turned away. Brett followed behind, muttering something under his breath. I didn't bother catching. The next hour was a slow, surreal collapse. The music faded out. The DJ quietly began packing up. A server wheeled the untouched cake away after a hushed conversation. With the planner, one of the bridesmaids started crying. Uncle Robert left without saying goodbye. Aunt Sylvia finally stopped smiling and instead pulled Melissa into a quiet corner, probably to deliver one of her signature, passive-aggressive scoldings about appearances. Eventually, the venue manager announced the reception was ending early due to unexpected circumstances. That was the final nail. Most guests filtered out quickly, murmuring among themselves, offering awkward half-smiles to whoever was left. I stayed behind for a few minutes. My dad, mum, and a couple cousins from my side of the family stayed with me. We didn't say much, just sat there in the now too quiet hall, sipping coffee while chairs were folded up around us. Think she'll ever speak to you again? My cousin Leah asked quietly. Maybe, I said, when she learns what an apology sounds like. She nodded. Think she'll ever pay you back? That one made me laugh. The final poetic moment came as I was leaving. On the edge of the dance floor, I noticed the original seating chart, printed in calligraphy and framed in gold. I walked up to it. Sure enough, every name was there, elegantly scripted under their respective tables. Except mine. I wasn't listed at all. Not even at table 8. They hadn't forgotten me. They'd erased me, and now they were paying for it. Every cent of the $4,100, and then some. An embarrassment. An awkward explanations. In a ruined wedding story, they'd have to retell every time someone asked, so what happened with the reception? I walked out of the venue that night feeling lighter than I had in years, not because I'd gotten revenge, but because I'd finally stopped volunteering to be heard. They made me feel like I didn't belong. So I left, and for once I was proud I did.